Hi, I'm Shmuel Feld.
I'm Jen Glaser. Rabbi Feld and I came together to work on our model due to a conversation we'd been having around challenges we see in Jewish life. Both challenges are to do with identity, but they come from very different directions. As a philosopher, a lot of my work is around identity, and the questions I've been thinking about is how can we use Jewish education to address the challenges posed by the fact that our children are growing up in a rapidly changing and increasingly fluid world. How do we best prepare our children to live rich Jewish lives in this changing world? If maintaining and developing a rich Jewish life depends on having a robust Jewish identity, then shouldn't we be treating identity construction as a Jewish life skill that has its place in our schools?
My concern is that I see a real gap between the way we teach text and the real work that text is meant to do. The real outcome of text work should be the creation of a strong decision-making process and a robust Jewish identity. In fact, in my mind, the core of Jewish learning, in order to internalize the capacity to craft our own identities informed by the decision-making processes our tradition gives us. If that's really the case, then why not create a classroom where the primary work is creating a sacred, robust identity composed of these decision-making processes? If we want our students to lead flourishing Jewish lives, not just when they are in our care in schools, but over the whole of their lifetimes, our task in school needs to be help them to come to their own tools and their own competencies they will need to take control of actively engaging in their own identity construction. At the heart of our model is a reimagining of Judaic studies to shift its focus towards empowering the students to engage in this kind of identity building work. We could think of this as a form of Jewish self-authoring. It will mean inducting students into a way of life that empowers and equips them to build robust Jewish identities and thus becoming the next link in the ongoing chain of our tradition. Our model focuses on teacher professional development to inspire and prepare educators to shift their focus of their Jewish classrooms towards skills and capacities of self-authoring. These include the following couple of ideas. Inducting teachers into a language of identity building, self-authoring, grounded in Jewish thought, psychology, philosophy, and textual tradition. Providing pedagogical tools they are able to utilize in the classroom that will transform the idea into a reality. Offering tools for a teacher's self-reflection as they grow in this methodology. And participating in a teacher network that provides ongoing support in the classrooms and institutions.
There are 4 components to this identity work that we're thinking about as it happens in the classroom. Each of these would be introduced and explored with teachers in their professional development, where they will also get practical tools through which to empower their students to attend to consciously to these elements in their own identity construction. So the first one is on the left with the word identity, which is developing a rich language about identity itself. It's funny that we kind of expect our students to go out into the world. We often see it when kids go to college, where they are in a totally different environment, and they actually have to think about their identity, but we often haven't prepared them to have a language of identity through which to do that. For instance, to think about themselves in terms of narrative identity or moral identity, or the kind of journey they're on, or things that come out of our tradition that speak to different formations of identity. Coming out of Jewish thought, psychology, and philosophy, we have a rich language to do that work. Through this, we can give students multiple resources to frame their own self-reflection and growth. Our model sees this kind of identity to be grounded in those traditions. The second element here, which is the self-management underneath it. Developing the capacity for self-management is another aspect of identity work. It means giving attention to and capacity for self-awareness and self-regulation. For example, developing competencies in language work or text work can often be something that triggers resistance in students because they see themselves not good at something, and it takes a long time for enough skill to develop to build results. For them to actually think about that and ask themselves, is this something I want to persevere with? What does it take to persevere? What are my resistances? And be able to build skills for dealing with that actually empowers them, not just while they're at school, but across their life in terms of an engaged Jewish life and the resources that enhance it. The final one that I'm going to speak to here is about meaning. We know that identity is also about building a worldview that requires a nuanced and sophisticated language about everyday things. To sit or to go on a journey. What kind of journey are we talking about? How can languages of going to or going from make us think about, so what experience am I in right now? And what are the Jewish sources and textual tradition and the voices of my tradition? How do they help me think about that so I can choose within those paradigms and think of myself as living, in a sense, Jewishly in that choice? And so taking everyday ideas and exploring them informed by deep Jewish constructs is an important part of this identity work.
The last is developing a framework for making decisions and living a Jewish life. Part of that is taking apart the decision-making processes that have come for thousands of years before us, when they were faced with various types of challenges, ideas, alternative cultures, and other ways to think about things as they're going on. To think about like this, to give a very short example of this, we think about the idea of a child deciding whether or not to sit in a sukkah, and whether or not sitting in a sukkah is not just a fulfillment of a personal gratification or an understanding of, do I want to, are my friends there, but rather to have a deep thought process of, is this an obligation? If no one else is around to see me do this obligation, does that matter? Does that affect my decision? Even more so, you have other parts of that decision model. What does it mean to sit in the sukkah? What are those concepts? So if you think about it from those two angles, of the rich psychological side of it, of how this is part of a decision-making process that goes back years and years, and the rich philosophical side of it, for instance, what does it mean to dwell in a sukkah, and what does it mean to sit, and what does it mean to stand in a sukkah and not be as much engaged, those are the concepts we want the people to be able to wrestle with in order to be able to understand how to make a decision-making process that's really, truly Jewish.
And through that, to build a really strong Jewish identity and engagement in life for themselves in this self-authoring sense. We look forward to seeing you in our in-depth session this afternoon.